If you truly know thyself, you know all of reality, because this body is just a temporal event in the span of time. And who we truly are is the eternal self. So that's one component of knowing thyself. So when you get that, you're ahead of 99% of the people.
Do you think money takes up more life space than it should? On this show, we discuss with and share stories from artists, authors, entrepreneurs, and advisors about how they mindfully minimize the time and energy spent thinking about money. Join your host, Jonathan DeYoe, and learn how to put money in its place and get more out of life.
Hey, welcome back. On this episode of the Mindful Money Podcast, I'm chatting with Jai Baker. I've never met Jai, but I get the deep sense from reading his book and reading about him that I'm going to call him a friend after this conversation. He's a veteran of the financial advisor world. He's been an advisor for 4 decades. He beats me by a decade. He is the CEO of Luminous Wealth, the only financial advisory firm I've seen that fully integrates life coaching into their offering. They've got a health and wellness coach, a spiritual guide, and a mindfulness advisor on staff. Jai described it as creating a healthy, stress-free environment where financial and personal well-being are seamlessly integrated. And I love that. I wanted to have Jai on the podcast to talk about his book, The Awakened Investor: Master Your Financial Anxiety while Unveiling a Conscious Pathway to Prosperity and True Fulfillment. Jai, welcome to the Mindful Money Podcast.
Thanks for having me on today, Jonathan. Look forward to our conversation.
I've been looking forward to it since I read your book, but since I read an article about your book, I was like, I got to talk to this guy. So first, where do you call home and where are you connecting from right now?
Home for me is wherever I go, but today I'm in Juno Beach, Florida. This is my residence now. I grew up in southeastern Virginia, spent most of my career in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And 4 years ago, I moved to this area, Juno Beach.
Gotcha. And so where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Williamsburg area of Virginia, Williamsburg, Newport News, Hampton. It's on a peninsula. Spent most of my time in Williamsburg on a golf course.
Oh, really?
But yeah, so that it actually led me to getting a scholarship back in the 70s, a golf scholarship to the University of South Carolina. And so I played there for 4 years and played pro for a year. And after that, as my wife at the time had asked me to do, she said, get a real job, and I got a real job. It became my career.
So I went straight from studying Buddhism to being a broker at Dean Witter for almost precisely the same reason.
I hold no grudges and I have no regrets.
Of course, but it's interesting, like little linkage there. So I'm curious, and I asked this of everybody, what did you learn about money? Because you're an entrepreneur and you're financial. What did you learn about money and entrepreneurship growing up?
Well, it seems like I've been doing some kind of work ever since I was about 5 or 6 years old. I can remember I had a great grandfather who had this large acreage of pine trees and his house was on that lot. And so you can imagine every year there's a lot of pine needles coming down. And, once a year we're out there breaking those needles up and stuffing them in the bag. And I can remember Grandpa saying to me, make sure you give them all their money's worth. That was kind of one of the mottos that I grew up with. It's actually kind of part of the pricing that I had in my registered investment advisory firm and managing wealth through the years. But I had an uncle that lived next door that was a security guard at a bank, and he'd bring home coins every night, and we'd put them in the coin books based on their dates and where they were minted. I had a passbook savings account. My mother was a banker. After my younger brother turned 13, she was a stay-at-home mom until then. But after then, she was a commercial loan officer at Virginia National Bank and survived 7 mergers and ended up with Bank of America at the end of her career. So my father, part-time every year in December, had a retail Christmas tree operation. We would go up in the summers in Pennsylvania and he'd pick out from the mountaintops the trees that he wanted, and he would buy 6 different varieties of Christmas trees to bring down. And so every night from, around Thanksgiving to December, I'm working on that lot. Every night we're coming home and counting the money and recording all the revenues for the day. And so it was just an easy flow for me. It was It was something that was natural. And so I had a lot of positive energy around money growing up.
It doesn't sound like there was a lot of money though. I mean, Christmas tree, farm, ranch, whatever you want to call it, bank income. That's not a big income. You didn't come from a silver spoon.
You're absolutely right. My father worked at Amoco Oil Refinery, so he retired as a superintendent there. And so, as you pointed out, my mom, I remember later in my career, at some point, I remember seeing my dad's annual income by chance. I mean, just some paper was laying around, and I glanced down and I saw a number, and then years later in my work, I'm going, oh my God, I'm making more like in 2 weeks than my dad was making all a year. In that family, I never wanted for anything. I was always given whatever I needed to do. I didn't feel poor at all. I mean, we were pretty much a typical middle-class family. My mom and dad knew how to manage their money affairs.
It strikes me though, and this is something that not every guest, so I started working when I was 12. And that's usually unique. That's something that people are like, wow, I didn't start working until I got out of college, or I didn't get, I got my first job when I was, late in high school or something like that. And you're saying 5 or 6, just raking the leaves or raking the pine needles, but it's still work and you still got some coin for it. And so making that connection early, how much do you think that feeds into what you become later?
Now, of course, through the years, things happen to us. I mean, all of us are programmed, whether you believe in reincarnation or not. We know we have this lineage we come from, this historical lineage. I mean, you can see what you look like, and you can see elders, and you see where some of these traits come from. And then we're in mom's womb for 9 months as an embryo, and we're taking on all of her chemistry and her emotions. But then we come out into the world, and until we're at age 7, our mind is in a theta state of frequency. And with that frequency, you're just a sponge for your environment and the information coming from it. You can't say no to any of it. And then not until age 7 do you start to form this beta mind, this low, mid, high beta. And that's how we're communicating right now. I can say something and you go, well, that's not quite right. But until then, we are programmed and we were downloaded all this information through age 7. And so what we are is the garbage bin of everybody else's desires and limitations that came before us. And the environment that we lived around. And I had a healthy environment to grow up in. But again, like I said, that's not to say that there weren't things that were said as I was a kid that impacted some things in my life that I had to become aware of and embrace, and just decide to put those things in a neutral box because they weren't serving me as an adult. But this is what we all go through, and some of us have it easier than others. But it was just a natural process for me. Also along the way, I mentioned I grew up playing golf, and the motto of my golf instructor was to be the best you can be at whatever you do, whether you're pushing a broom down an elementary hallway or you're flying a jet or whatever it is. Now notice he didn't say be the best at it, because now you're looking outside of you. And if you're a weightlifter, eventually you're going to become disappointed because your body is going to fade a little bit. But he said, be the best that you can be at it. And I've always carried that motto in my life. My father's motto was basically everything in moderation. And so I was always supported. And so that was a framework that I came from. I never looked up to anybody or never looked down at anybody, and still don't. I mean, for me, I had a lot of early success with golf. So when I'm on the golf course and I'm playing with all these other people who were wealthy people, I mean, they were in my field now. Golf was wealth back then. So, if I was a better player or turned out better than the rounds that day, then I was a wealthier player than them, even if they were worth $10 million.
I see so many parallels. There's so many ways I could go. But I want to sort of focus us on your experience in the industry and then get to your book. So how did you get started as an advisor 4 decades ago?
So my first position was with Prudential Insurance Company in Columbia, South Carolina. I was what was called a debit agent. That's where you actually had an accounting book. People would mail in their insurance premiums to you, and you would account for those. If they didn't pay them in, you're going to go either give them a phone call or show up to their house. And with that industry, that gave people an opportunity to cross-sell of the products of these people. I joined them in February of 81. I was their rookie agent in the state of South Carolina in that year, and I absolutely hated my job. But it was a very impactful experience because in 81, we had 10% unemployment. We had 21% money market yields, 19.5% 30-year mortgage rates. And the stock markets weren't going so well that year. And so at that time, these insurance companies were creating new products to attract to the consuming public. And that's where universal life contracts were started. Get a high yield on your cash instead of the whole life policies that we sold you years ago. Other people wanted to be able to invest their cash in stock markets. They've created the variable life contracts so people can invest in stock markets around the world. And those products really haven't changed through the years. And that knowledge base has carried me through my whole career. So I left there and I joined a financial planning firm in Greensboro, North Carolina. I was with them for 7 years. That was actually the infancy of financial planning. And we had a CPA on staff. We had an attorney that was in our hallways, and we were developing full-blown financial plans. Tax rates were quite high back then. So how you structured your investment holdings dictated your taxes due. In fact, you could be a high income earner, normally might be in a 60% tax bracket, but we could zero out your taxes based on the way that we put together your investment holdings. So it was still at that time very, very much a commission-based industry. And so that created a lot of conflicts of interest. I left there to join Legg Mason Wood Walker out of Baltimore, regional Wall Street firm, and a terrific company to be with. So that's where for 7 years I learned the Wall Street watch. And then I took a brief turn with Prudential Securities for 16 months. And after 16 months, I was quite willing to pay them back my bonus that they had paid me. I left a $50 million retirement plan in a local hospital I knew I wasn't going to bring with me. And I went in debt for about $80,000 to start my own firm. I just couldn't stand being with that big behemoth. And the only way I knew how to control my clients' experience was to create that for them. And so I did it as an independent financial planner. And I had one assistant at that time. But through the years, I built out the vision that I had and the way that people should have their financial affairs handled. And what I was doing was in my client meetings, I was using that as my laboratory, the feedback loop of what we were providing and what people were needing to enhance this wealth journey. And so after a period of years, I hired a CPA to be integrated in what we were doing because as I've learned through the last 15 years or more, the CPA and the wealth manager and usually the attorney as well at year end, they need to be joined at the hip.
Yep.
And then I hired another CPA because you can't have just one CPA. If that guy leaves, you got a whole client base with no CPA now. And then I hired an attorney, and then I had other wealth advisors. And all these people were on staff. They were paid bonuses, were given equity ownership of the firm. And so no one piece, no one component of our firm is magical. I mean, we have smart, talented CPAs and attorneys and wealth managers all around this country. What was magical about it was we were a team that was operating from the family mission statement of our clients. We were philosophically aligned. We could challenge each other collegially with the strategies that we're going to suggest to our clients. But we were doing that on a daily basis year round. We didn't have to worry about scheduling something with somebody and seeing who's available. We didn't have to drive anywhere. We were all right there together all the time. And that was what the magic of that model provides people. At the end, before I sold it, I even brought in an Ayurvedic practitioner for mind, body, spirit work.
Yeah. I noted the sort of the breadth of the coaching, and it's something I haven't seen much. So let's flip over to the book a little bit. So The Awakened Investor, the title, The Awakened Investor, it sort of begs a question. You know, if the goal is to be an awakened investor, that means there's a period before awakening. Can you tell us about that period? What is it that we're blind to or unawakened about?
Well, there's two components to that. First, we're blind to what Wall Street, Bank Street, Insurance Street really is. Financial Street, as I call those three entities, knows how to manipulate your mind better than you can. It knows your mind better than you do. It can pierce that amygdala that's scouring the earth for danger. And they do it in multiple ways, through languaging, through stories, through sound, you name it. And they do that to manipulate the consumer, because money in motion is profits to these organizations. And they don't mind if the consumer makes money, but they're going to get theirs first. The broker is second in line, and the consumer is third in line in that process. And the industry, and not just that industry, but most industries, lack integrity and morality in working with their clients. So I don't say that they have a client relationship. I call them a customer relationship. If you're not a fiduciary that's placing your client's interests ahead of you, they're just a customer. That's a temporary event. A client is what you would hope to be a lifelong relationship. We unveil who Wall Street is. We talk about what capitalism is and why it works. I mean, it's lifted up all of humanity through millenniums and raised the standard of living and the quality of life and longevity of life. But people don't look at capitalism in a positive way because they associate capitalism with these middlemen. Wall Street, Bank Street, Insurance Street are just middlemen to capitalism. And we can pretty much eliminate the middlemen and just get right to the raw of capitalism and benefit that with our savings in life.
Beautiful. I think so. So you're waking up to the Wall Street, Bank Street, and Insurance Street, right? So you're waking up to this. What makes it so stressful to us? Obviously, we don't know about those streets, but why is it so hard? Because it just seems like we're pushing against everyone pushing back at us.
Well, it's a muddy landscape. I mean, a person doesn't really know what they're going to get when they walk into a Dean Witter or a JP Morgan or Merrill Lynch office or Northwestern Mutual, because, I mean, we haven't had the systems, the educational systems in our country to teach people what to know to expect. And really, this whole idea about managing wealth for individuals and families is a pretty new phenomenon to the human experience. I mean, we've been here for hundreds of thousands of years, if not more. And it's really only been since 1978 when the 401k plan was brought into existence. Prior to that, most people were covered by their corporate defined benefit plans. And so within those plans, the employees weren't managing their own money. The company was. And then with the advent of 401k, now the employee can take control of where that money should be invested, but they've never had any education in that. And they still haven't found a high level way of providing investment choices for people in those plans. So it's only been in the last, 40, 50 years that anybody has had a chance to understand how to manage wealth affairs. And so that's why we're not so good at it. That's why it's so intimidating. But I will say that's the other unveiling that takes place, is not just unveiling who Wall Street is, it's unveiling who we are. We have to wake up to this skin encapsulated bag of bones with these five senses and realize that there's something much bigger than this physical body. There's something much greater with our non-physical aspect of who we are, and start to tap into that.
I know that you write about sort of fear and greed and regret and sort of the biases we have in our heads. And so there's the waking up to what's happening outside of us. And then there's the waking up to what's happening inside of us. And then there's sort of culture and evolution and systemic factors. How do we do it? Like, how do we wake up?
Well, the first order that I take people through is to know thyself. Because, if you truly know thyself, you know all of reality. Because this body is just a temporal event in the span of time. And who we truly are is the eternal self. So that's one component of knowing thyself. So when you get that, you're ahead of 99% of the people. But then there's another aspect of knowing thyself. Now you have to find out who this person is that's been programmed in this first 7 years. And to your point, finding out what these biases are. Richard Thaler won a Nobel Prize in economics for behavioral economics. And he thought if he could label these behaviors that we have and making decisions around money that weren't serving us. We were making the wrong choices. If we could just label those behaviors, we wouldn't behave that way anymore. Well, he also said, too, that in his 40 years of his work, he never changed anybody's behavior. We have to get to the root cause of all of these behavioral topics. And I can lump them all into one word: fear. All of them describe fear. Even when you're greedy, that's on the same spectrum of fear. And so, that's fear of missing out. I mean, why does somebody have to gamble a lot of money to get, a lot more money if they don't fear not having enough going forward? I mean, most people would say, I've got enough, I don't have to take chances. So all of these behavioral biases is fear. And so I do this human archetype assessment with our clients. And it's based on the Carl Jung work and research. And so we each have a broad persona that we represent as people. And then we even drill down into unique thumbprint within that persona. But among the things of those findings that we do with our clients is we see what traits are serving them, where their strengths are. But then we also see these biases they have. These are blind spots that aren't serving them. And so what makes it a bias? I mean, you would think that if somebody's not behaving properly and they're getting these bad outcomes, that they would correct it, but they don't see it. I mean, water doesn't know itself to be wet. Fire doesn't know itself to be hot. So when you are that much with that personality, that behavioral trait, you don't recognize that you're doing that. And so that's where the coaching comes in. After we take them through the human archetype assessment, which is actually, by the way, it was developed by DNA Behavior out of Atlanta, Georgia, Hugh Massey. He's Australian by birth, a genius in developing this body of work. But then I take them through a family genogram because I understand all of life is fractals, infinite repeating patterns of information. You see it in the cosmos, you see it in nature, and then you see it in the behavioral patterns of our choices. And when you put the family lineage of two people that you're working with on one page, and you're going to the grandparents and the parents and the siblings and even your children, and you're collecting some major aspects of who they are in terms of their careers, their health, their relationships, their money scripts, you start to see these patterns all on one page, and all of a sudden somebody sees why they are who they are. They truly know thyself at that point because they can see it in their family. I've had so many people wake up to that. When I do these human archetype assessments and when people come in, and they'll usually one or the other partner will say, that study just really had me nailed except for this one thing over here. And that's not me at all. And usually the other partner would look across the table from them with this big smile and they'll go, that's exactly who you are. So it's fascinating work that we do with that. And so we get really deep and wide in understanding who this couple is that we're working with. Now, once they start to reveal their authentic goals, our team can step into their shoes with our expertise and experience, knowing exactly who they are and what they're wanting to accomplish and guide them along through the years.
Yeah.
Quite typically in our industry, we were told to know thy client through a usually 10 questionnaire of risk tolerance questionnaire. And like what I would say is the client doesn't know themselves. How are we going to ask them 10 questions and all of a sudden we know them? Yeah. So that's why I get so deep and wide with this work.
Totally agree. I go on and on and on and on about the worthlessness of those questionnaires. It sounds like you agree with that. That's great. So I'm just curious. You're talking about sort of almost spiritual things or deep psychological things. I'm wondering if you get a lot of pushback from people, or do people just like, yay, this is great?
Everything is spiritual.
I'm with you.
And I've never gotten a pushback, believe it or not. But to your comment, that contrast came up through the years. I've always gone to a lot of different retreats through the years, anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks long, ever since 1997. And usually after a couple of days, people will eventually ask me, what do you do? And I say, well, I'm in the wealth management field. And their response is, well, how can you be so spiritual and be in the wealth field? And I would say, well, that tells me more about you than it does about me, because money is a neutral tool, just like nuclear power is a neutral tool. You can light up cities with it or blow up people with it. It's a character revealed through the use of the tool that makes it good or bad. And that's what money is. And yet in the United States, we have such a horrible relationship with money.
Yes, we do.
It's not just the elephant in the room, it's the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so one way of right sizing that is in the process of what we do with our work today, where I've married the wealth management process, what I call the 4 decades of evidence-based wealth management. To me, it's very much of a formula, but I've married that with the Blue Zone research of those cultures that have the longest longevity and the highest quality of lives. And so once we realize that we're not just money, we have 7 other major aspects of who we are, from, physical health to diet, to self-care, to careers, to relationships, to emotional intelligence, to spirituality. Once we see that all on one page, it's all of a sudden gotten right-sized to a certain degree, because now that's just 1/8 of who we are.
And you're anticipating literally my next question was about the 8 arenas. You just went right to the next question. I love it. Where do the staff fit into this process of discovery and supporting people in the other 7 arenas? Like, where does the health and wellness coach, the spiritual guide, the mindfulness, where do they fit in? And how do you employ them to the ends for the clients?
So the first introduction that a client would have would be with me. As you can see, I get deep and wide already with the psychology and emotional intelligence aspects of working with people. They also then work with my attorney and CPA in that planning phase. Once people get on board and from the wealth process and my team, then they're turned over to our consciousness coach. And so then they're kind of the doorway to all of the other aspects that we're going to be working with these folks in. They will be handing the ball off to the body nutrition coach, to the spiritual advisor, lifestyle coach, and the environmental coach. And the reason why I even went that far with before, selling my firm 4 years ago, I brought in an Ayurvedic practitioner for mind, body, spirit. I was working with people for more than 30 years. And I thought, as long as we met or exceeded their financial goals in their life, they're going to be contented people, right? They're going to have happy lives. And I would get, after a couple of years into their retirement years, and they're still stressed out. If the market goes sideways, they're worried that it's not going to be making enough. Certainly if the market goes down, they're stressing up. But if the market goes up, they're getting stressed because it's going up too much, too fast.
Yep.
And so I wanted to provide a solution for that. And that's where I brought in this consciousness team that I have now. And I went to an event a couple of years ago, and the main speaker that they started out the morning's talk with this one line. It was the premise of this whole talk that day. He says, "Money is the biggest stressor in America." And I said, "No, it's not." He said, "Do you want to say more?" I said, "Your mind is. Master your mind. You master your money issues. You master your career issues. You master your relationship issues. Master your health issues. And certainly now you have emotional intelligence to make discerning choices in all aspects of your life."
That's an enormous statement. So my deep meditation practice myself says you're talking about just a regular daily meditation practice and how that might have very positive outcomes on your emotional intelligence, your window of tolerance for things that are difficult, all these things. Is that what you're talking about, or is there more to it than that?
It starts there.
Yeah.
And once somebody sits silently, empties their mind, and they're spending time with their higher self. So you know what the word meditation means, right?
Please tell me.
Okay. It means to become familiar with. Familiar with what? The higher self, the light that you've been incarnated into this body from, that's sending that light to all 60 trillion cells in your body, bringing homeostasis and balance into all of your body. And it affects more than just your body. It affects your mind. It affects actually your intentional basis of how you're experiencing your days. I mean, we live our lives based on our assumptions. So what we have to do through meditation is take that programming and deprogram ourselves. In fact, we were hypnotized. We have to dehypnotize ourselves from our 7 years of programming. Because if we don't do that, we're going to live a life that was fated to us. Life that, we were programmed with everybody else's desires and limitations. But once we wake up to that and we say, you know what, there's this authentic self in me somewhere that feels a lot different than what I was told that I needed to be, where I needed to go to school, what kind of career I should have, and what kind of sports or academics or arts I should have been interested in. There's something different that I wanted to follow, and I didn't because I was programmed and then channeled into these things. Once you wake up that there's a more authentic self inside of you than that, and then you also are awakened to the fact that you can reprogram yourself and have that kind of life, now you're living a life of destiny, not of fate. And that's where we would like to get to with people. So, it's a journey. It's not a destination. Just when you think, and I've been in these windows of time in my life where I thought, oh, I'm enlightened. Right around the corner comes that next trigger point, and you go, oh, it's not a destination. It is a journey. And that's why I say, people can go up to Mount Shasta and they can sit up on top of the mountain and meditate for the rest of their life. And they can go, see, I'm a good guy. I'm a good woman now. And I've become enlightened. But you have to test that in the real world. You have to test that with your family, with your colleagues and life's experiences and what it throws at you. But you have to wake up to that.
I know the Buddha said something like, I don't know if this is the Buddha or somebody bastardizing something that might have been by a monk or something, but he said something like, before I was enlightened, I saw the mountains and the rivers. And after I was enlightened, I saw the mountains and the rivers. So it's like, right. It's just, right. It's your relationship with those things that change. Those things don't change. I ask every advisor this question, and I want to ask it of you. I think the answer that you're going to give is going to be way different. What is the financial advisor's circle of competence? What should clients be hiring us to do?
We have to know them, right? So you have to know them deeply, and they should be hiring us for our expertise that's in line with their authentic self, that's in their interest, not in our interest. So many times, and maybe you understand this little technique, but I've seen a lot of times in the industry, somebody has this big traditional IRA and they work for a corporation that has a retirement plan. Well, a great technique for somebody is also to be able to put money into a IRA that's non-deductible contribution. And then it would be great to take it out of that and Roth convert it. So now that money can grow tax-free during their life and beyond. Well, a person can't do that if they have a big IRA because there's a pro rata rule in that taxation when you convert it to a Roth IRA. Well, a person could do that though if the advisor took this big IRA a client has and says to the client, go stuff this in your retirement plan, your corporate retirement plan. Now it's out of the eyes of the IRS. Now you can follow through with that, making that non-deductible contribution to a traditional IRA and backdoor Roth in it where you got a tax-free Roth. But advisors isn't going to say that because they're going to lose advisory fees for making that recommendation. So at all times, the advisors have to place the client's interest ahead of theirs.
And that's what clients should be looking for, is someone that does that. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody's got their back.
Yeah. Right. Who knows the landscape and has their back, right? There's a ton of noise out there. I want you to break it down for us. Let's say someone new comes in off the street, whether they hire you or not, they walk out of the office. And what is one thing that they should focus on today that could lead to better personal financial success for them?
Well, it's the financial plan to begin with. It brings a lot of organization and clarity for what you can accomplish in your life. It puts meat on the bones for why you're going through these savings that you're doing and for yourself, giving you some benchmarks and targets to hit. You can build an ideal world. You can build savings, but you can also build an acceptable world, one that you will really enjoy, and test those out. We can control how much we save when we retire, how much money we want to spend in retirement years, how much money we want to give to heirs and so forth. We can even control whether we are in a conservative or aggressive portfolio, but you can't control the return that you're going to get. But we can stress test that. So we can put all these variables in place and stress test these and make sure that we're going to come up with a confidence score that we feel good about. And there is ranges. And this is valid. I did it for four decades. Yeah. So I know this works. And so I would say the first thing to do, first order of business, is develop that financial plan. One of the first things that anybody can do without a planner, and I would highly advise, because this is like the most egregious oversight that anybody has in all of their wealth affairs, and that is check your beneficiaries of your life insurance, of your IRAs, of your retirement plans. I can't tell you how many times I've onboarded new clients, and most of the time, these things are not who they want to be as their beneficiaries.
Yeah. I know they set them up 15 years ago and never reviewed them. People die and people, sort of lose interest in other people. Yep.
Yeah, we've seen it happen. It's a big mistake, and people can control this. So I say control what you can control and stress test the rest, and have somebody to guide you along the way, not to make that one big mistake.
Yep. So the planning and sort of understanding and controlling what you can control, that's the thing to do. What's one thing that they're probably doing that they should stop doing for the same positive effect?
I mean, market cycles that's part of why you get the better returns that you get versus bonds or putting your money in cash or other investments. And so it's stop the stress, live in the present moment. That's where eternity is, in the present moment. You can't physically get to the future, and you can't physically even go back to the past. So be present right here, right now. And that means that you also have a quiet mind when you're in that present moment.
Yeah.
And so it's to be mindful.
Yep. Just to wrap up, a couple more personal things. This may be weird, but I know that you listened to a couple episodes, so maybe you're prepared. What was the last thing you changed your mind about?
I wasn't going to go on to any retreats the first half of this year because of the new work that I've ramped up doing, but I just got back from 5 days in Cancun with Dr. Joe Dispenza at an advanced meditation retreat. So I decided at the last minute to go down there to do that. There's 2,100 people there, represented 74 different countries from around the world, 1,100 people from the United States. Most mornings we'd get up either at 4 a.m. or 6, and the days would go on until 7:30 in the evening. And there was a little bit of lecture, but most of it was breath work and meditation.
Wow. That's great. Is there anything that people don't know about you, or maybe you've told them they don't remember, that it's really important to you that they know?
So I don't try to convince anybody of anything. I tell my story. I'd say how we do things and why we do the things that we do and what we don't do also. And if that resonates with them, awesome. If it doesn't resonate with them, awesome. Because there is no reason to try to convince somebody of something. They're already programmed to believe otherwise. So I'm not going to be able to affect that change right then. And I'm not going to risk that for me or them.
Right.
There's other ways to manage these things other than the way that I do it. I just know that after 4 decades, this is what places the chance of success in their favor. And that's why we use these principles.
Yeah. Finally, tell us how people can connect with you. Where do they find you?
Well, I have a website, www.luminouswealth.com. They can reach me at my email, which is not Jai, but tim@luminouswealth.com. And my phone number is 561-919-4808. They can also go to Amazon for my book. It's called The Awakened Investor. Those are some avenues to go. And at the website, at the top bar of our website, there's a tab for taking the human archetype assessment. They can go there. It's a 44 forced answer question quiz. They need to find a quiet spot for about 10 or 15 minutes to take it, but it'll give you a report right away. It has a lot of valuable information. It also comes with a couple of videos describing the attributes and qualities you have after taking that quiz. So it's something that's very valuable and people have really enjoyed taking.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I'll make sure that those links go in the website as well. So thanks for coming on. I've loved the conversation. I think I predicted this at the beginning. I'd love to call you a friend. I'd love to stay in touch. We'll make sure all that stuff's in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you for being a guest on the Mindful Money podcast.
Namaste. Thank you, my friend.
Namaste.
Thanks for listening. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at mindful.money. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/mindfulmoney. We'll be sure to read those out on future episodes.